Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Access Asia. Coming up in the show, violence escalates in Hong Kong as some protesters take the path of radicalisation. The police have hit back with tear gas, rubber bullets and in some cases live rounds. Our reporters on the ground bring us more from a bitterly divided city. A tragic record that Delhi has pledged to address. As the country with the most cases of tuberculosis in the world, India redoubles efforts to wipe out the infectious disease. And a children's movie sparks a geopolitical row with the South China Sea at the centre of controversy surrounding DreamWorks film Abominable. We're starting in Hong Kong, where the city's Legislative Council has become a microcosm of a city divided by pro-democracy demonstrators and those loyal to Beijing. Angry lawmakers were dragged out of the chamber after heckling Chief Executive Carrie Lam, and violence in the surrounding streets has continued in recent days. More than 2,300 people have been arrested in the pro-democracy demos so far, and some protesters have taken a more radical approach. Our reporters on the ground tell us more.
They've been squaring off for months. Riot police in full gear, and ever more determined protesters. And around them, the residents of this working-class neighborhood screaming in anger at the police force. The avalanche of insults ends only once the police clear out. Almost at random, 2 people in the crowd are arrested. In the past few weeks, some protesters have taken a more hardline approach. Hiding behind umbrellas, some of them slash the tires of this unmarked police car. Others wreck an abandoned tour bus previously used by mainland tourists. Protesters are also targeting restaurants, banks, and shops that belong to mainlanders.
These mainland-owned stores are very powerful. They're everywhere in Hong Kong, and we can't really do without them. They dominate the market, and that makes the Chinese government very arrogant. Thanks to its economy, China is able to bring to heel entire governments or companies. We saw it recently with basketball in the NBA. So that's why we're attacking them. It's to get our revenge.
At night, repression is even harsher. To avoid being arrested, the protesters retreat with the help of the neighborhood. This protester is only 20 years old. A few months ago, he took part in peaceful demonstrations. Now, he has a petrol bomb strapped to his belt.
I haven't used it because I don't want to hurt anyone.
You know, first we were 1 million, then it was 2 million people who took to the streets. But the government continued to ignore us, so we had to turn to more violent action to bring attention to ourselves.
Since the movement started, over 2,300 people have been arrested. One of them is 29-year-old Colin Chung. In July, plainclothes officers stopped him in this mall and then followed him home. Investigators are accusing him of planning an attack on policemen because of this video he shared online. It includes pictures of Hong Kong officers with their wives and kids, as well as pictures of their apartments and their addresses.
Police officers on duty no longer show their service number. They make sure to conceal their faces. So maybe among them are Chinese policemen or members of the Chinese military who have infiltrated Hong Kong. This is how they operate.
Colin believes authorities are using facial recognition technology developed by Chinese companies to identify protesters. The video he made, according to him, is a form of revenge for this unjust practice. Colin Chung is now out on bail, still awaiting trial. He could face up to 6 years in prison.
Moving to mainland China now, evidence has come to light that authorities are destroying Uyghur burial grounds. The Chinese government says it's being done to standardize old graves and that it's part of an urban development program. But Uyghurs overseas say the destruction is part of state efforts to eradicate their culture. Catherine Viet has more.
This bulldozed land used to be a Uyghur cemetery. Only a few crumbling graves escaped the near-total destruction. Left behind, human bones. It's a scene that's being played out all across Xinjiang province in northwestern China, even at sites featuring the shrines or tombs of famous individuals. The resting place of prominent Uyghur poet Lutpula Mutalip in Asku has now been turned into something called Happiness Park, featuring fake pandas, children's rides, and a man-made lake. The removal of these cemeteries means Uyghurs no longer have a place to go to honor their dead.
Pray for our ancestors. This is our tradition. And so if they destroy those important sites, where do Uyghurs go?
Since a counterterrorism campaign launched in 2017, Beijing is believed to have detained more than 1 million people from mostly Muslim ethnic minorities and sent them to re-education camps. The government says it's necessary to fight religious extremism and separatism. Researcher Rachel Harris says raising the cemeteries are part of wider efforts to crack down on Uyghur culture.
This question of land is really at the heart of what's going on here. Really, when we talk about policies of cultural erasure, what we're talking really is about an uprooting of the Uyghur people from the land which they have inhabited for centuries.
The Chinese government insists the cemetery removals are being done to standardize old graves, and it's all part of urban development efforts. But the Uyghur community isn't buying the official explanation.
So the grave sites, I mean, this is something that ties us to our history. It ties us to our ancestors, who we descend from. And as you know, China is currently trying to indoctrinate our people to become Chinese. They don't want to leave any evidence, and they want to destroy any evidence that we are different, that we are Uyghur or Turkic, and that we're not Chinese.
While the government has destroyed grave sites in the past, what's new is the pace of the destruction. Using satellite imagery, activists have been able to track dozens of cemeteries that have been razed over a 2-year period. Despite a global outcry of its treatment of Uyghurs, China shows no signs of amending its policies.
Next, India has made great strides in recent years when it comes to tackling infectious diseases, yet hundreds of thousands of people still die from tuberculosis every year. Speaking at the United Nations, Prime Minister Narendra Modi unveiled an ambitious goal last month to overcome the epidemic in his country by 2025. Monty Francis tells us more about the efforts currently underway to fight that disease.
Highly contagious and deadly. Tuberculosis, which ravaged the West until the mid-20th century, remains a huge problem in India. The World Health Organization estimates that 421,000 people died from TB in India in 2017, more than AIDS and malaria combined.
We have the highest burden in terms of drug-resistant TB in the world globally. There is medication available now, except the access to these drugs is limited and they are pretty expensive.
According to the World Health Organization, there were 7 million cases of TB across the globe in 2018. India had the largest number of any country, with 2.69 million cases, accounting for 38% of the world's total. Addressing the United Nations Assembly last month, Prime Minister Narendra Modi set an ambitious goal to eradicate TB by the year 2025. Modi's government says it has created new patient monitoring systems and is now using artificial intelligence to help screen for the disease. It also doubled the budget to fight TB between 2016 and 2018. TB spreads easily in India's crowded cities, helped by poor sanitary conditions. Complicating matters, some strains of the disease are resistant to drugs and account for about 135,000 cases of TB in the country.
Every undiagnosed, untreated patient infects 12 others. When you find one case and you treat him well, you have stopped a fountainhead.
There is cause for optimism, but access to drugs and healthcare remain a big hurdle in India and worldwide. The World Health Organization estimates that globally, 3 million people who have TB are not getting the care they need.
An animated children's film has sparked controversy in Malaysia and Vietnam due to a scene featuring a map of East Asia, including the South China Sea. That geographical depiction supports Chinese claims to the disputed territory. And the movie, made by DreamWorks and a Chinese studio, has been pulled from theatres by Malaysian and Vietnamese authorities. Catherine Kidia-Clifford reports.
I will make sure you get home, back to your family.
Chilling regional relations, mythical creature the Yeti or the abominable snowman has put its large foot in a long-running dispute. Abominable, the animated film from Universal's DreamWorks and the Chinese Pearl Studio, has been shunned by both Malaysia and Vietnam, as discontent has spread on Twitter under the hashtag #BoycottAbominable. In the offending scene, a wall map of East Asia can briefly be seen, supporting Chinese claims to the disputed South China Sea. Back in 2016, an international tribunal overseen by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea invalidated Beijing's claims in the region, as seen on this map. Malaysian film distributor United International Pictures said on Monday, Universal has decided not to make the censor cut required by the Malaysian Censor Board, and as such will not be able to release the film. A week earlier, Vietnam's main cinema franchise, CGV, pulled the animation from theatres, a decision these film fans agreed with.
I wouldn't watch it, even if it was still being shown in cinemas. The map is simply wrong.
It violated Vietnam's sovereignty. If kids saw this film, their minds would be injected with false information at a young age.
Beijing rebuffed the 2016 ruling and has continued building and staffing outposts on man-made islands and deploying ships in the area, fueling tension with Vietnam, Malaysia and the Philippines, who all claim territory in the region.
Well, that's all for this week's show. Do join us here next time for stories from across the continent. Till then, stay with us here on France 24.
Keep up to date on the latest from the Middle East. We bring you political, economic, and cultural events from the region in this weekly Middle Eastern program.
Middle East Matters, presented by Sanam Chantier on France 24 and France24.com.